I am Jim Collison, and this is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on March 11th, 2022. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you're listening live, love to have you join us in our chat room. There's just a link right above me there on our live page. Sign in and you can ask your questions live. If you're listening after the fact, and most of you do, but if you're listening after the fact, you can always send us an email with your questions, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Call to Coach on your favorite podcast app or right there on YouTube so you never miss an episode. TyAnn Osborn is my guest today. TyAnn is a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach and founder of Osborn Consulting Group, which sounds a little Marvel-ish. It sounds like one of those, the Osborn Consulting Group, which serves like you have superheroes, right? In that, which serves a national client base in leadership coaching, organizational effectiveness, and performance acceleration. She's trained and coached over 10,000 people using a strengths-based approach to help enable effectiveness, increase productivity, and I love this one, and win at life. TyAnn often partners with other strengths coaches and to deliver training around the country, and her favorite format is large group events. We'll talk a little bit about that. Her top 5 maximizer significance: learner, communication, and futuristic. TyAnn, thanks for coming on. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Jim. Super excited to be here.
Let's have you talk about you, because I think that's always way more effective than what I just read. Most people kind of checked out for a few minutes while I was reading. They're like, oh, come on. So give us a little bit of your background and maybe, when you're meeting people, what do you say about yourself?
Yeah, you bet. So I've got a corporate background, started out after undergrad in one of those consulting firms. Back in the day, all the big accounting firms had their consulting arm that went along with it, and then had a stint in PepsiCo, and then joined Dell, the computer company, and then eventually went over to the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, which, as I like to say, giving away $2 billion for a living is not a bad way to make a living. But eventually, and I also had some expat assignments where I got to live and work in India and China. So had some pretty interesting assignments there. But one thing that was super fun for me is I came across the Gallup body of work and then was able to bring in a Gallup trainer, so Dan Kincaid, back in the day, and had him come into one of my organizations. And when I found the Gallup work, I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. And so that kind of started the whole snowball. And here we are today.
You've been coaching a long time, and I think certified for 2014. Is that right? 2014.
Yeah, started in 2013 and got it finished early 2014. That was back in the day when it was the you had to do it the long and painful way.
Yeah, longhand. Everything was written out in longhand, and sometimes we chiseled things on stone. It was tough, not all the digital stuff that we have today.
Yeah.
But some interesting, if you reflect back for a second and you think about, that 2013, 2014 time frame for you becoming a Gallup certified coach, what was the drive? If you can kind of remember that, I know it was a while ago, but what was the drive to get certified? What were you hoping for?
So I just loved it. And part of what I was doing, Jim, is I'd already put together like my own training from the Gallup materials because I loved it so much. I mean, it really spoke to me about, finding your passion in life and getting the right person in the right seat on the right bus. And I just loved it so much. So I really wanted to bring the message to people. And then when I got the email about, hey, we're certifying people, I thought, oh, great. I want to get in on this. And so I wanted to be at the front of the line in doing this. And so I was really excited to be one of the first certified coaches in Texas at the time. So that was I just want to be at the front of the line.
Yeah, no, right on. We've grown and changed a lot over those years. And if you think about, from expectation perspective, or from maybe your own coaching perspective and some of the things you
Yeah.
do, what do you think's been the biggest change for you in that is over that time period, and maybe in your coaching, or what you've seen from a trend perspective with people? But what's the big trend or big change that you've seen?
Whew. There's been so much that's
Mhm.
happened, in this space. And I think professionally, personally, I mean, one thing that we all have to think about when we're going through this journey, for ourselves is kind of, where are you going to be in this space?
Yeah.
One thing, you and I were talking about before was when I went to the training, I kind of assumed everyone was going to be like me. And
Mhm.
then when I got to the training, I realized no one else was there who was like me. And everyone who was at the training was coming at it from a really different point of view. There were
Yeah.
people who were faith based. Who were, doing this as a part of their church. There were people who were embedded in their organization, who were as part of their learning and development groups. There were, people from just all kinds of backgrounds and walks of life. And so, really, I was, I think, the only one who had their own business and was
Mm.
doing this as an independent coach. And I thought, gosh, I thought everybody was going to be
Yeah.
there like me. And so, even other independent coaches are kind of doing this in a wide variety of ways. And
Mhm.
so, was one of the few people who was doing large sessions, and I still don't run into many people who take on large session kind
Mhm.
of events. A lot of people just coach one-on-one or small teams or that kind of thing. So as we go through this stuff, just personally, you really have to kind of figure out your sweet spot.
Yeah.
And then professionally, I mean, we always talk about bringing the message to more and more and more people and organizations. And, I like to say, eh, there is no shortage of work out there for us. And I like to operate with an open hand because there's no shortage of businesses and people who need this message.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's plenty of business for all of us.
There's a lot of work to do out there.
Absolutely.
It's funny you mentioned the kind of the independent coach, because
Yeah.
here in, we started doing these 2013, I want to say, called the coach, and we focused primarily on independent coaches. So there kind of became this kind of persona in the community that it was a lot of certified coaches were independent.
Yeah.
The numbers don't actually hold up that way. The groups
Right.
that you mentioned, right? We have a gigantic education group, coaches that
Mhm.
who've come through that are working in university settings. Um, we have a lot of embedded coaches, and we actually have more
Right.
embedded coaches now than we've ever had. And so it's there's been a little bit of a shift that way too. I
Yeah.
hear from, and we see a lot of the kind of, what we would say independent coaches. You guys kind of group together
Yeah.
in that way. But that's certainly for some folks who might think that's all there is. There's certainly
Right.
a big population of others as well. As you
Yeah.
think about lessons learned. Like, let's get to some nitty gritty on this. Like, hey, I'm a new coach. By the way, we've had, I don't know the exact number, but let's just say thousands. We've had thousands of new
Yeah.
coaches since the pandemic. It's been 2 years.
Oof.
You and I, as we record this on March 11th, we're coming up to that ominous, at least here in the United States, that March 17th date. It was a
Right.
Thursday, right?
Yep.
That like do you know where you were? I mean, it's one of
Yeah.
those kinds of events, right? So
Absolutely.
2 years into this, if you're thinking, let's do some lessons learned as you think about for a new coach, or even for some who've been doing it for a while. What kind of things have you learned
Yeah.
um through this time?
Well, let me back up to that date and kind of give people my story of what was happening because it was a good lesson learned in terms of not putting all your eggs in one basket. So I was literally at the airport kind of 2 years ago to the day, and I was getting on a plane to fly to Miami to speak at a Bank of America conference. So that was my jam, was big live speaking events. So I was going to be doing a conference on stage, big event. And I happened to look down at my phone and check my email, and an email had come through from the conference organizers that said, Conference has been canceled. Everyone don't come. And I thought, no, I'm at the airport. I'm like en route. Like I've checked a bag. I mean, I'm on the way. And I thought, who cancels a conference the day before? That, I mean, I've never heard of such a
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
That's so silly. I mean, that's going to be a colossal waste of money. And then I had to go through the process of like going up to the Delta counter and, unwinding the ticket and all of that. And I just thought that's so weird. And I go home, and then in the course of about 6 days, my entire book of business collapsed.
Mhm.
Because when you do live speaking and training, big events, big conferences, guess what's the first thing to get canceled in a global pandemic? And so, I mean, it was like a series of dominoes, like, brrr.
Mhm.
And it was a big lesson learned there that, when you have your entire book of business is kind of a one trick pony, it had been going great and then it didn't. And
Yeah.
so, you know, up until that point, I can count on literally one hand the number of even virtual calls that I had ever had. And I remember someone asking me, "Do you ever do virtual events?" And I was like, "Psh, I don't do that stuff. I love that in person energy." Right? My themes are influencing. I'm high significance. I like that thing. Well, let me tell you what happens when all of the rest of your business is canceled. You
Mhm.
figure it out real fast. You go get some equipment and you start figuring out that virtual stuff real fast.
Let's talk about this diversity of business concept for you.
Yeah.
Certainly you saw, like my business is wrapped up in person events, and I need to diversify. If you look at your
Yeah.
your book of business today, or the coaching work, that book of business sounds so impersonal. We'll say your coaching practice, right? That
Yeah.
sounds more personal. W- have you successfully diversified, and what will keep you from, certainly as we get back in person, what will keep you from returning to that habit going forward?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing I had to do was think, can I even do this? And does what I do possibly translate? And like, technically, can I do this? So I kind of had a moment of, well, first you're scared, and then you have a moment of like, can I do this? And then you're like, well, I better figure it out. Like, mama needs new shoes, I gotta figure this out, and I'm a breadwinner for my family, I gotta do this. So you figure it out real fast. And then how do I translate the energy that I bring on stage and the energy that I bring to my clients, which is my thing. That's really what I help differentiate myself with, and for my clients. How do I bring that in a virtual capacity? Because we've all been on those virtual events, which are just, they drone on, and they're just sort of death by webinar. Nobody wants that. I don't want to be that. So how do you do that? And so I had to figure that out, Jim, and then figure out, how do I reach out to my clients and convince them that, hey, I have these offerings and they can be awesome, and that
Mhm.
you need to spend your money in these ways.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's sales right there. But really leaning into those influencing themes. And this is where, we tell our clients all the time, you got to lean into what you got, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
leaning into those and like, hey, go with me here. And because I have that trust with my clients, they were like, okay, you know, we can do this. We still have training dollars. Let's test this out and see if it works. And then they do. So now what I'm finding are, for a while, all the clients went virtual. So, and then, but now, we were talking about kind of last year, some clients started to poke their heads out a little bit and say, okay, we're back to some in person. And then they kind of retreated when we saw another spike up in the virus. But now it's kind of interesting. I've got a great mix of virtual and in person. And then now it's kind of fun to have offerings in all the spaces. So now I've got everything from, you want a 45-minute kind of fun virtual thing, all the way up to full day or 2 day, in-person events. So I kind of feel like I've got a whole menu of offerings now that I didn't have before. So it's been even better than it was before.
For other coaches thinking through that discovery process, so the actual behind the scenes, as we think about what you did to diversify,
Yeah.
um, walk me through, or walk the listener through, like, just what would be your recommendations to them if they're kind of looking like, well, all I really do is this kind of thing and I want to branch
Mm,
out. How do you think differently about that? And what kind of things did you do to help you kind of think differently to do more in more variety?
sure. Well, one thing I always like to think about is what are people asking for? And in a little trick from improv, instead of saying no, try to say yes. So listen to what people are asking for and then think, okay, what are my core things? And how, if people are asking for certain things, how can I potentially link my core to some of those other things? So for example, diversity, equity, inclusion. So the DEI space is really big right now. So potentially, how can I link strengths to some of that DEI content? There's a lot of potential linkage there. And that's a really potentially lucrative thing that you could do. Could you talk about strengths and DEI and come up with a 45-minute talk on that? That could easily be a 45-minute session that could fill you know, a Rotary Club lunch and learn sort of thing. And, that could be an interesting offering that you add to supplement your offerings that you currently have. That could be virtual, that could be in person. So I start to look at those things and then start to add to my collection of things that you offer.
Ty, do you have a process that you go through when you're thinking about a new well-being would be another one of those hot topics
Absolutely.
right now, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Do you have, for your thought process, and I know everybody's different, but for your thought process, do you have a way of onboarding new content for yourself or new subjects for yourself that you kind of work through? Certainly, you just can't say, "Oh, I'm going to start delivering well-being," and bam, it's there, right? You kind of got to work through that material, right? Do you have a method that helps you
Right.
onboard new content?
So, again, I like to have core content and then stuff I can kind of add on a little bit too. So it's not like creating whole cloth brand new content. I like to have kind of a core and then add on a little bit. And then I've got some great clients that are really fun partners that are they're so always eager for new content and they're very fun. They're always up for, hey, I've got some new stuff. Would y'all be open to having like a lunch and learn? Would you be interested in this topic? So it's kind of that partnership with the client and some core content with some new stuff to it. So I think both of those things work really well. And again, Jim, that's part of that relationship you build over time.
Mhm,
Those things serve you. So that's been a recipe that's worked well for me.
mhm,
But that could be
mhm.
something too. Even if you don't have a paying client, you could develop something and then pitch that to your church or a community group that you belong to or your local library. You could say, hey, I've got this seminar that I've developed. Could I present this? Who's going to say no to that? Groups like
Mhm.
that are always looking for new content. So it's a real low risk way to test it out.
I know you're also part of a rock star mastermind group, and
Yeah.
we won't say the names to protect the innocent, but we won't forget one of them anyways. But do you ever, how important are they? They're
Oh,
important in a lot of ways, but
yeah.
is that another avenue? Do you guys spend time
Yes,
talking about creating new content, or at least discussing it?
we do. And, I think some of them are a little more formal than others, but one of the things that does for us is it gives you a safe space to talk about both challenges. Here's what I'm seeing. Has anyone else faced this? Does anyone else see some creative solutions? As well as, hey, here's something that's worked for me. And then we all kind of pitch an interesting solution. I'm like, oh, that's such a cool idea. Or, hey, here's a template I've developed. Or, here's a new client or here's something. And we all end up working with each other too. For example, one of our members moved recently overseas. And so I'm working with her to kind of be a delivery arm for her for a client that's here in the States because she's overseas now. And so if we didn't know each other and have that relationship, that couldn't be possible. So I highly encourage people to develop their tribe. And again, that's not going to happen if you're just sitting in your basement at home,
Hey,
kind of
hey,
wait.
hey, be careful now. Okay, you're talking to me now.
Or sitting in your home office here with only your cat to talk to.
Right, right.
You got to put yourself out there a little bit.
Yeah. How'd your group form, your mastermind group form? How did that come together?
Oh gosh.
Do you remember? It's been a while, right? I mean, you
It
guys been getting
it's
together for a while.
Yeah, it has been a minute, right? Part of that was going to the summits
Mm,
and
yeah,
meeting people in person. You got to put yourself out there. Some of it was, hey, I met this person who's good friends with that person.
yeah,
Some of it was just that energy. Honestly, I'm not even sure how. It just kind of a group that got together over time. A lot of it was through summits and just kind of friends of friends. And that group at the last summit. One of Lisa Cummings, she couldn't be there. And so I kind of stepped in for her at one of those summit breakout groups and just,
yeah.
over time, it just kind of congealed that way. So I just encourage people to, you know, always, again, say yes to opportunities because it always leads somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think of that improv trick in saying yes in my support role for the coaches
Yeah.
around the community. I get asked a lot of questions I have to say no to, but I
Yeah.
always think that, okay, how is there a way I can say yes in
Yeah.
saying no, right? In that.
Right. And even when clients come to me and ask for things that are outside of my sphere or outside of my wheelhouse, even if I say that's not something I offer, I always say, but here's a resource for you because then
Yeah.
they still come to me. But if I just say, nope, and I'm a dead end, guess what? They stop coming to you,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Although in my role, sometimes I have to say no.
Well, you
Stop
have,
doing that.
you're everyone comes to you, Jum,
They do.
because
They do.
you're like a single point of contact. Everyone comes to
Or a
you.
single
So
point of
it's a
failure, depending on how you look at it, right? Depends on the day.
but
Richard says he can
yeah.
highly recommend being a part of a mastermind group, and I think we talked about this a little bit with Charlotte when
Oh,
she was on as well,
right.
and with Brent when he was on. I think important. Lisa's
Yes.
asking a question. Says you talk about presenting and giving talks when you're working with large groups. How do you balance speaking versus team exercises? And I want to add in not
Yeah.
just team exercises, but conversation and I like to sprinkle in, and
Mm,
this is a technique I've learned from my Gallup friends is put some things out there and then put them together in pairs. This has been harder during the pandemic, but I
yeah.
think we're coming back to it. So as we think about that question, how do you balance that speaking versus team exercises or feedback in the group? How
Yep.
do you do team exercises with mega groups? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. So, Lisa, great question. And I also want to circle back to something Richard said here in a sec. So, don't let me forget what Richard said. Lisa, so one of the things I do when speaking from the stage, and I've done this with groups of up to 200, it is really important for me to have still a catalytic experience for people because I don't want to I mean, just personally, I don't want to sit there and just watch a talking head for hours because that's no fun. So I immediately get people up and moving and talking. So always want to have people talking in table groups, getting people up, even doing a physical representation of those continuum activities, having people partner up, doing some let's do a table thing. Let's do an engagement activity where we divide the room into things. So I'm always like, we're going to be talking, we're going to be doing this. And I always, always, always present this as this is a beginning. This is a beginning of your strengths journey because there is no way we can do a full strengths journey in 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever period of time that I'm allotted, right? So, another thing that I just started doing, which I'm having good success in, is saying, okay, if I have you for X amount of time, 2 hours or 4 hours, Then I've started selling clients on this is the beginning. We're going to follow up then with a virtual session after this. But the clients then know me, they know me in person. So when I have a series of virtual sessions afterwards, we have a much better relationship because we've met each other in person rather than just starting virtually, which is fine, but you miss a little bit of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when I'm sending out email drips afterwards, people still have a relationship with me and your click-through rate is a lot higher because they're like, oh, it's an email from Ty, not just a spammy feeling email. And they're like, oh, it's a Ty exercise. So I'm much more likely to do it rather than just like, it's one of those other auto-generated kind of emails. But
Yeah.
I'm always about exercises. So anytime I talk, we immediately do an exercise right after that slide, not just like, it's Ty droning on forever. Oh, and I do a lot of giveaways too. And every time I do a giveaway, the person has to come up on stage and get it.
And like, what kind of things do you give away? What are popular items for you?
Well, Jim, I give away Gallup books, obviously.
I didn't pay you to say that. That's not an endorsement. Like, but it's certainly in those
I know.
settings. It's a good
Well,
idea, right?
I mean, not to be pandering
Yeah.
or anything, but I'm a big believer, and I always say this, that leaders are readers. And in fact, this was funny. I had someone in a session one time and they said, oh, I like your virtual background. And I was like, no, this is my office. And they were like, no. And I actually had to get up and go touch my bookshelf back there so they would believe me. So anytime I do a session, I have like my stack of books and I hold them up and I talk about why I like, strengths-based leadership or
Yeah.
it's the manager. And so I always give those books away, but I also sprinkle in like the Gallup picture deck or even some Starbucks cards,
Sure.
every so
everybody
often,
everybody likes Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody, but most people.
Well, most people. But not to forget Richard. I wanted
Yeah.
to bring him
Yeah.
back in because I very much count Richard as a part of my tribe as well, because he is such a great resource. And actually, he and I are working on a project together too. So love Richard over in the UK.
Great. And then
Yeah.
when what I love about giving away books, whatever they happen to be, and our books are great for this, but tie those into the topic that you're covering right then,
Exactly.
right? And
Yes.
so that it kind of makes sense while you're doing it. If you're,
Right.
I think it's just a good exercise to
Yeah.
let them know why they're getting that, and
Exactly.
and maybe
So
even talk a little bit about it, right? And
right.
here's what's in here that you can use today.
So that's just it. Like sometimes I show even Paul Allen reading the Let the Rabbits Run clip from the Soar with Your Strengths. So then I'll give
Mhm.
away the Soar with Your Strengths book. So that's always a good one because it's small. So it doesn't seem quite so overwhelming to
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
the strengths-based parenting book if we're talking about kids or whatever it is. So
yeah,
that's easy stuff. And because it has a code in the back, it kind of feels like a twofer.
right,
People are getting something.
right.
Or an easy thing, I do this all the time. People always laugh because I'm like, you won a business card from me. But it's, I say, send me an email and then you'll get a coaching session with me, or I'll unlock your top 5 and I'll give you your full results. But it also makes them engage with me, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm, yeah. Well, those are there's some great ideas in there. I think we thought with Zoom, we couldn't give away things like that. We couldn't use that
Oh,
same engagement, and
yeah,
you
no,
still can, right? There's plenty of digital products,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
All that stuff is available digital, and if
absolutely.
you talk about it in the beginning, say, "Hey, I got a stack of things I'm giving away to
Right.
those who are paying attention." Be super clear, like, I'm pandering to your attention right now.
Oh,
And
100%.
because this is what we do in person, right? We do the exact same thing. It's
Yeah,
the reason we give stuff away is so that they stay engaged in what we're doing.
right.
Why not do that via Zoom, right? Has that been successful?
Totally. I had a great session yesterday. A guy jumped in and had a really great comment. I had a great comment in the chat box, and then I had a guy who came off of mute. He had a super profound thing that he said, and you could tell he was more introverted. You can tell he really wasn't like one of these big charismatic kind of speakers. And he made this like super profound connection. And I was like, Trevor, I am going to send you a prize. And, you
Yeah.
can totally do
Yeah.
that.
No, same effect, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it gets people engaged. Justin has said in chat, he says, that's interesting. I have a 4-hour face-to-face event coming up, and we're doing a pre-event Zoom, which I think is a good idea. The purpose of that is to start the relationship and allow us to start a bit faster when we meet.
Perfect.
Wow, who would have thought like we would have started bringing in the virtual first to speed up the relationships now? I think that's a good
Yes.
lesson learned, right? And that now that everybody is virtual efficient,
Yeah,
proficient is probably the better word. You really could do it virtual first, right?
absolutely.
Nate also says that
Yeah.
Richard is awesome and should be a part of everybody's tribe, whether he likes that or not, right?
Highly agree. Yeah.
So yeah, it gives us, I think that those digital assets, I think Charlotte, who we had on a
Yep.
couple weeks ago, did a blog post that had a bunch of information in it. And it could even just be about
Yep.
leaving some of that, hey, I've got some tips beyond this to
Right.
provide to you. Here's a link to come back to it. Um, any other thoughts as we think about virtual and now, and I really want to think, I don't want to spend any time focusing on what we did because the world's going to change again on us, right?
Yeah.
Where we are going to be more hybrid. Any thoughts as you look ahead and any advice you'd give to coaches about things you learn that you're going to implement going forward in whatever situation it turns out to be here in the future? I can't stop predicting it. I
I
don't
know,
know
right,
anymore.
Jim? I think it's just we always have to be adapting. We always have to be nimble, and we can't ever say, well, this is my business. Like I've got my one deck and I've got my one handout, and this is, I'm good to go. I mean, we always have to be adapting and adapting our material, adapting our content, and always keeping an eye on what's happening. And obviously, right now, I mean, you and I have been talking about this, but the great resignation, the great discontent, the great whatever you want to call it, that is so top of mind with our clients. You can't just show up and say, yeah, but all I'm here to talk about is strengths when that's what's on people's minds. So whether it's um, engagement or DEI or discontent or resignation or well being or whatever it is, you have to be able to link in strengths and that stuff. So you've got to keep yourself relevant on top of the market as well as, prepared for whatever medium that we need to be in to meet our clients where they are. So
Yeah.
that's my advice.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I want to shift gears a little bit because
Sure.
when you joined the call this morning and I saw you had a great microphone and it sounded great and your lighting was good, we meet early just so that I get a chance to test all those things.
Right.
You committed to a studio at some point, and I am surprised after 2 years of doing this how many people still really have bad sound, bad equipment. They're doing this, this is their professional presentation. How
Right.
important and how did you get to a point where you got kind of the right gear and you got comfortable with it and you even added some lighting to what you're doing, which is super helpful, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through that thought process. One for me, because like I really like talking to people who care about their sound because I hear it, right?
Right.
They don't, but I do.
Right.
But what
Yeah.
was that thought process and what kind of advice would you give post, as we're going into this new era? Because I don't think this goes away, by the way. I think
Right.
virtual still has a spot, but talk a little bit about equipment.
Oh, Jim, it's so important. And I think well, it only takes one webinar where you're using what I call the nostril cam, which is the webcam that's in the corner of your laptop and you're in front of your window that's backlit. And you have terrible lighting, you have terrible sound, and the webcam is shooting straight up your nose. It only takes one of those, and you watch yourself. So I would encourage you, if you haven't ever done it, go back and watch a recording of one of your sessions and then just see it, listen to it and see it and think, is that the best me? And if I were a client, is that what I want to pay for? And then, just ask yourself that question. It's like, okay, if the answer is, oh, that looks like crap, maybe you ought to reconsider. And then the good news is the price of technology has come down so much. And so I think on a positive note, and positivity is one of my top 10, if we're looking for things that the pandemic has helped with, it actually accelerated technology in a way that I think might have taken otherwise like 10 or 15 years to do so, because it really dropped the price and accelerated, external webcams, external microphones, external lighting, and brought to the forefront the importance of these things. So for less than $100, you can get a great webcam, a microphone, a ring light, and all these things. Again, for under $100, you can get all three of those things, and get yourself in business
Yeah.
with prime delivery within 2 days. You can get all that stuff set up. So I highly encourage y'all to do that and then see the difference it makes. So if you're charging a client, I mean, this really makes the difference between offering something for free, being able to charge $200 and being able to charge $2,500 or more to a client and having a professional looking product.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really, really important. And I'm always surprised how many people still just want to join with their laptop in a big empty room that, the laptop, like you said, the laptop's not positioned correctly. And you're like,
Right.
oh, have we not learned anything over the last, 2 years in
Well,
this? Makes me sad a
eh,
little bit.
here's another just kind of thing that bothers me a little bit. And I realize, not everybody's house has a dedicated office. I totally get that. But one thing that kind of bothers me, especially when I'm doing one-on-one coaching, is when someone has their bed in the background,
Yeah.
because it makes me feel like I'm in your bedroom with you. And
Yeah.
that's a little too intimate for me. And even though I'm a high influencer, and we've got some of that woo, and we build relationships really quickly, that's a little too far even for me to feel like I'm in bed with you. And so I would prefer not to see your unmade bed in the background. So even if you can just switch that camera a little bit to see like a blank wall behind you, I would much prefer that to an unmade bed.
Yeah, and there's just some different, the angle, behind you is pretty small. And so if you can pivot some things
Yeah.
when at the beginning of the pandemic, and I actually my work orientation goes this way,
Yeah.
and I have a black curtain here. It looks a little bit different, and everybody was kind of used to seeing me coming in from the studio. And they're like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in the same spot. I just turned this way." Like,
Right.
"Really?" Like, yeah, and
Right.
so you can I think there's some things
Yeah.
that you can do, and you can just take it up a notch a little bit as a coach. I think, yeah, you're
Yeah.
never gonna get for those that you're coaching, you're never gonna get I mean, there's just gonna be various levels, but
Right.
I really do appreciate it. This is just a personal thing for me when somebody's made that effort to kinda up it a little bit.
Yeah.
You got an external mic with the external webcam and got earbuds in, and you're
Yeah.
making sure like, okay, this is gonna sound great. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't take much, and it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot. You can
No.
make it if you want it to. You can make it cost a lot.
If
That's
you
one of
want
those
it, but
things.
really
Yeah.
under $100 will
Yeah.
get you pretty far these days.
Yeah. Let's you've got maximizer number 1, and
Yes.
I have it 3. By the way, I think this is not scientific, but I think a lot of coaches have maximizer. It's really weird. Whenever I get on calls with coaches and we're talking about
Yeah.
strengths, maximizer always pops up.
Love
If you
it.
think about scaling going forward, the new this, in whatever this turns out to be, and scaling your coaching practice,
Yeah.
what to do more efficiently, what kind of things do you
Ugh.
think you're going to do or you want to do, or what's on the horizon for you, going forward when we think about scaling what you do as a coach?
Whew, Jim, that maximizer, we just can never leave good enough alone, right? And which is both good and bad sometimes. But for me, I mean, I had this big aha last year that I had really become kind of the bottleneck for my business. And I've been in business now for 10 years. And I had gotten to the point where I don't think I can grow anymore because I'm the limiting factor here. So I had to start to put a team in place and then to let go of some things and to let other people start to help me, which is always a little bit like Yeah. But now I've got some coaches that I can rely on that are taking some of that work, and I've got some administrative help finally. And then you also really have to think, what's the highest and best use of my time and what's not? And then again, how can I leverage some things? Um, one thing that's I really struggle with as a maximizer is every time I look at content, I really want to mess with it. So I
Mhm.
have to ask myself, is this good enough? Or do I need to spend time messing with it? But
Yeah.
one of my favorite things, and this was actually, I was on the way to the last summit and I came across a sign in the airport, and it was a bookstore, and they had one of those sandwich boards outside of the bookstore, where people like advertise specials and that kind of thing. So it was a board and it said world's closest bookstore. And that made me laugh so much, and I took a picture of it and I thought, this is just what my maximizer needs to hear, because sometimes close is good enough. Like, it wasn't the best bookstore, wasn't, the best one on the planet. It was the closest. And I thought, that's so true. Sometimes close
Yeah.
is the best option.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we sometimes say luck is where opportunity, where preparation meets opportunity,
yeah.
and like
So,
they were there. That I love that, because I think sometimes we may get locked into a scenario where like all these things have to line up just right for me to coach people,
oh,
where it's like
no.
there's those moments you just might be the closest coach,
Just
right?
jump in.
In the
Jump
moment.
in. I mean, if you wait for everything to be perfect, as my mom says, perfect doesn't exist, right? So you're never going to have, I mean, I have friends that have always talked about having their own business, right? But then I have this one friend and she says, well, I'm going to another conference on, entrepreneurship, and then I'm going to get this certification on whatever. And then I think I need a master's on whatever. And I need this and I need that. And I need a better, light, and I need a better this. I'm like, are you ever going to get that business started? Or I'm still designing the perfect business card on Moo. Or I'm like, no one
Mhm.
cares.
Yeah.
I mean, or people who are like, I'm still futzing around with my website. I'm like, there are people who don't have websites,
Yeah. Get it launched.
just
Um,
launch it.
get rolling. We've got a few minutes left. I want to open it up a little bit for we've got a festive live audience, so I want to give them a chance to ask some questions as well. Um, what do you think, if you were to give a piece of advice, anything I've missed from an advice standpoint on your side that you wanted to talk about? What would that be to either new or existing coaches kind of going forward? Anything that we've missed so far?
Well, one thing I see on the Facebook groups a lot, and I will first of all caveat with Facebook is not my love language. So I'm only periodically in there. That I have a book rattling around my head, and that might be the title of it. But there are coaches out there who help quite a bit. I think Ralph in Germany, and then Charlotte obviously kind of has the help on Facebook locked up, in addition to you and Brent
Mhm.
O'Bannon and some people like that. So I would say, if you're new to this space, there are coaches out there that will help you, but definitely respect their time, and they offer paid help. So definitely respect them, but you can pay them to mentor you. So I think that is a really good investment, and I would encourage you to do so. So
Mm.
rather than just ask for all of their knowledge for free, recognize that they have put years and years into this space,
Yeah.
and respect that.
Eh,
And because we've built all of this over time, and I would just
right.
ask for that respect for
Yeah,
them.
no, it's great advice. Steve says the ABC, right? Always be coaching, but I like this,
Yes.
but don't be annoying. Appreciate that.
I
Uh,
say that too. I would say always be coaching, always be selling, and always be learning.
yeah,
Those are things I
you might
say.
be the closest coach. I like that. That's a story I'm gonna steal, because like there are moments where just you're not the best. You weren't the best
But
position, and
you're
you might
there,
not be ready, but you're the closest.
right?
And you got to jump on it. Lisa asked a question. She says, "Ty, you speak so well. Well,
Oh,
well paced and no ums. Have you done any training as a public speaker? How do you prepare before you speak? Any intentionality in that, or are you just naturally a gifted speaker?"
well, gosh, Lisa, thank you. I will be sending you a Starbucks card after this. I think, Lisa, it's just a function of how often I do that. And that just goes back to what we're saying, get as much practice as you can. So if it's speaking at your church or the PTA or your women's group that you belong to or whatever it is, get as much practice as you can. Watch tapes or videos or those recorded Zooms of yourself. And I know, Jim, I've heard you say this, that when you hear yourself, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I would say that differently. But that's good learning too. I'm always learning. That's part of that maximizer where we say, like, oh, I wish I would have done that better. But that's good learning. It's all learning. It all goes into making us better the next time.
Yeah, you have to review your own stuff. You've got to record yourself and go back and listen to it. You just
Right.
have to. And it kills for some people that's causes anxiety. You got to figure out some ways to get around it because it just makes
Right.
you better in the end.
Right.
Ken says we share Maximizer 1 and Learner 3. When do you find the perfectionist side of Maximizer sneaking into
Oof.
your coaching? Oh, this sounds personal.
Ken, all the time, all the time. But it just goes back to, do you feel like you did the best you could? Did you offer the best advice? I was listening to Jim and Charlotte the other day talking about that difference between coaching and consulting. Because I have a consulting background and often my clients come to me for consulting advice, my coaching tends to be more on the consulting side rather than pure coaching. So that's the framework and the paradigm when I set up my engagements. That's usually the side I am more on, but I make that explicit at the front end. So I think that helps when you set up your engagements to really flesh out, where are you on that spectrum? And, you do the best you can when you talk to people. And then when you know better, you do better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's practice, right? It's just
It is.
people always say, they like the way I do what I do here on Call to Coach. And I'm like, well, I've done this 1,000 times,
I
right?
was going to say, you've done it a few times now,
I
right,
wasn't
Jim?
good at it in the beginning, just to be honest. And, I've gotten better, hopefully. I've gotten better as I go, but sometimes it just takes practice. Melanie in the chat room says Toastmasters is one of those groups
Yes.
that you can, and they're really good at this because they're very, very
Completely agree,
structured,
Melanie.
right? Very disciplined, and they bring that approach to it. I had the opportunity to do a Toastmasters group when I was in high school. And that was
Yeah.
just such a foundational
Yeah.
change for me in thinking about the way I present and I talk and I do the things the way I do. I actually find if I try to concentrate on what I'm talking about, I'm worse than if I just let it just let it be because I'll
Yeah.
stumble and not finish sentences. If I'm trying to do it, it's a disaster. Whereas if I'm in the flow, if I'm in the I
Yeah.
have to trust my instincts, right? I have to
Yeah.
trust the training that I've done and just go with it. It gets
Yeah.
it's
You've
worse.
got that, Jim. We've got that influencer thing. I've got high communication. I've also been in some other groups, not quite Toastmasters, but some other groups
Yeah.
that did public speaking. I did Model UN when I was in high school. So I think those experiences together all lend to some of that speaking
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, good. It's good. Jennifer asked this question. She also has significance too, and this is a great question, Jennifer.
I
How
love
has this thing
significance.
worked well for you? And because it's not as a common as a theme, right? So we don't
Right.
see this a lot. And
Right.
when's it been a hindrance? I'm more interested in how's it helped you, but talk a little bit about that. How does your significance fit in?
Okay, Jennifer, I will let you know. Significance is number 2. I've also got self-assurance in my top 10. So those are the twins, right? And those are 2 of the least frequently found themes. And I've got some competition in there. So people could say, gosh, that probably makes you a real jerk. But that's the significance, especially, is one of the themes that people have a hard time really accepting and liking. Oftentimes, that's the one people are like, ugh, don't tell anybody I've got that one, right? But I love it because for me, it's all about importance and legacy, meaning that we want to work on things that are important and help others see their contribution to the world. And when I can help other people recognize their greatness and that they have a place in the world and other people need what they have to offer, and I can see that spark go back in their eyes, oh, that's the part that lights me up. And if I can do that from the stage in a bigger audience, like the more people I can impact in that way, that's a good day for me. And so that's how it manifests in my life. So there is a little bit of a performance element from that significance that shows up for me. But really, it's about how many people can I impact to help them see their place in the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer because as we spent a lot of time on Theme Thursday talking about this me versus we. And I think both those themes get mismaligned.
Yes.
Because they get the me focus only. And what you just said is I do this for others. I turn this significance on because I want to impress the importance of legacy in others, right? I think that's so powerful, right? I think sometimes, and I've been a little over the last couple years, I've been a little hesitant. We sometimes drive to the negative side of things way too fast. And I love that. I think sometimes if we're struggling with that, if we just take that theme and point it to others, it removes that negative thing that's happening inside of us pretty fast. Listen, I think it's really hard for it to be a hindrance when it's helping others. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
These are strengths, right? It's called the strengths finder, not the weakness finder.
Although, I shouldn't say this, but somebody made one of those years ago now, just kind of as a joke, and super, super funny from that perspective. Last call for questions from the chat room. Ty, anything else? You've got the community's ear. Anything else you'd throw in just in the final few minutes that we have left here? Maybe some self-assurance and significance put together facing forward to these coaches. Can you inspire them in just 2 minutes? Like for those that are feeling down or they're dragging a little bit today, let's get a little inspiration on the way out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I very much believe, Jim, that everyone is here for a reason. There's a reason we're all together right now, and that you are a coach and you've chosen this as your journey. And so it's really important that you are doing this work, and the world needs you. And so the world needs what you have to offer. So if you ever are having one of those days where you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if, I've got the passion, or if there's enough business out there for me, or if I should do something else. Just know that doubts are normal, but you're in the right space and there is enough business for you and you've got the talent. So stay the path and you are exactly where you're supposed to be.
I like it. If you could take your mic off, you could drop it. But I wouldn't recommend you do that. Ty, if folks want to get connected to you, what's the best and easiest way to do that?
So while Facebook is not my love language, LinkedIn is. So please come over. Just go to TyAnn Osborn. That's the one benefit of having a unique name is I have all the handles. So TyAnn Osborn on LinkedIn. Please connect with me there. And you can also hop over to my website, TyAnnOsborn.com. Those two places will get you connected with me.
Super great. Well, I hope everything's okay for whatever fell in the background.
I'm going to chalk that up to my cat, who's very naughty and sitting here, slightly off camera.
If I hadn't brought it up, it probably wouldn't have even.
It was my cat.
Have been a point. Ty, thank you for taking the time today to be a part of this. If you'd hang tight for me 1 second,
absolutely,
we'll close this up. With that, we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we do have available now in Gallup Access. Head out to gallup.com/CliftonStrengths for coaching, master coaching, or if you want to be a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach like Ty is, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'll get some information out to you about how you get that done. Join us on any social platform by searching Clifton Strengths. And if you want to join us in the Facebook group, it's not Ty's love language, but it is for some. Head out to gallup.com/groups/call-to-coach. And that'll let you get in that group. We have almost 15,000 in that group now.
Wow.
And so it's quite the conversation. Although the certified group, we have just a certified group as well. That one has caught fire over the last year or two, and that thing, there's more threads in there than I can keep up with. So appreciate you guys out there helping each other doing that. Don't forget, if you first time you've joined us and you want to join more of these, you can always follow all the events that we do. Gallup.eventbrite.com. Follow us. You get a notification from me whenever I post anything new. We want to thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, and why wouldn't you found this helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it. Just take the link and send it to some friends, and we appreciate that as well. We'll do a little bit. Ty, can you stay around for a little post show? Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do a little bit of post show for those that are listening live. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.